Now that we have movies and video games, why not do TV shows now? Truth be told, I didn't normally plan for this video to happen. While I don't hate watching TV shows, I normally don't watch a lot of them when they come out. Especially a chunk of those shows are from Star Wars and or Marvel, which are franchises I care very little about now more than ever in my life. But I surprisingly watched quite a bit of stuff this year. Sure, more of it is animated than what I normally do, since it's a medium I respect a lot, but there are a few live action shows I watched this year. Also, I did have time to watch shows like The Bear Season 3, The Penguin, or Shogun, but whatever, I saw some great stuff this year and I want to mention them from worst to best. Side note, I finished Hell of a Boss Season 2. It was pretty good, definitely not as good as Season 1, but I had a very good time with it, 8 out of 10. Anyway, let's jump into it. The first show on this ranking is honestly not even a surprise if you know me or know the channel name, and that's the Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender show Season 1. This isn't the worst TV show I've seen, hell it's not even a contender for the worst thing I've seen or witnessed in 2024, but this show bothers me more to think about it. The first problem is that it removes the mystery aspect of Season 1. We are straight up shown Aang's past in the first episode, when in the original show it was a mystery on what Aang was and how he was stuck in the iceberg. Aside from 2 characters, I did not like any of the characters in the show. Aang feels like he is trying to be goofy but also serious at the same time. Katara is just so forgettable, and Sokka is not really all that funny in this one. But the worst part about the show, which makes me regret watching it, is how they handled the episodes. Aside from episode 1, 7, and 8, they combined 3 episodes of the original show into 1 episode in the show, which is weird because the longer runtime should be enough to cover all the major beats of Season 1. The season, I would say, is the least plot-centric, but it's just so bizarre. Like, they combined the town segment of the King of Omashu with Jet and the Southern Air Temple. Then in the next episode, they place the Cave of Two Lovers for Sokka and Katara, which is a Season 2 episode. I remember being so bored that I paid attention when the most interesting thing happening was that Danny Pudi showed up in the show. But that's only because I am community brain rotted, but it's something I guess. It also doesn't help that the show is trying to be more serious, which there were clear signs of that change when the crew said that they were going to target Game of Thrones fans. I don't think I need to explain why that's so wrong. The only thing going for the show is that the production value in terms of the CGI and sets is being used, unlike the M. Night Shyamalan movie. And that Zuko and Iroh were handled pretty well. They felt pretty in character in the show, and I really liked how the actors portrayed them. The one scene they added that was great was Iroh's son's funeral. It perfectly shows how the Fire Nation family is the same as it's been for 100 years, but Zuko is the one exception to the rule. But yeah, this is not a good season. Probably won't watch Season 2. Up next is The Knuckles Show. Now, you think you'll expect me to say that this is garbage, and honestly, I get why someone would say that, but I don't see it. Now, you can say the show is bad, that's your opinion, and you can hold on to it. But honestly, I was split down the middle with this show. The first thing everyone can agree on is pretty bad is that the show is not about Knuckles. We instead follow the story of Wade Whipple, a comic relief character from the first 2 movies. Wade is just not a very compelling character to follow in the show, since he's the comic relief and really isn't someone we know a lot about from the first 2 Sonic movies. Actually, while writing this segment, the best comparison for this show that I can think of is that it's the Cars 2 of the Sonic movie universe. They both look like they will focus on the poster character, but instead they are mostly following the comic relief character as he goes through a journey of becoming a better person. And now you can't get that out of your head. There is also an overall tone issue with this show. It feels like they want to be more serious than the previous 2 Sonic movies, since Knuckles is a very serious character, but it doesn't work because of the premise of helping Wade win a bowling tournament. There are also some pretty low moments in the show. I think the biggest standout moment in terms of how out of pocket and unfunny this show can be is the rock opera scene in episode 5. It's a moment that feels like it's trying to pander to kids, but it's also a backstory for Knuckles, so it should be somewhat serious. So it comes off as a tone issue. Now that's not to say I fully hate the show, because there are some things that I quite like. I like seeing Knuckles bond with Wade's mother, I like the action in the show, and episodes 1 and 2 were probably the best episodes in the show. But it doesn't save this show from being very misguided. As my friend Buster said, not worth defending, but not worth passionately hating. And I overall agree with that. Anyway, Ted was a show that came out, and honestly, it is a show that exists. This one is a bit harder to talk about for me since I never really had a solid way to tell someone much about this show. I saw the first movie and I enjoyed it to some extent, but never saw the sequel. So I was a little intrigued going into this show. So let me get to the good stuff out of the way. I really like Blair in this show. She is usually my favorite character, the most level-headed person in the family, and had the best jokes in the show. My favorite episode in the show was the Halloween episode, since it was focused on Ted and Blair, who are my favorite characters to follow in the show, and it had some of the best jokes in the show, like the apple pie bit that had no right being so hysterical. I also really liked the casting, with Georgia William as Blair being the standout for me. But even after all of that, there are things in the show that just don't do it for me. I never really cared for Johnny's parents whatsoever, and they honestly break down certain episodes for me, like my two dads. That's actually part of the reason the Halloween episode is my favorite in the show. While the jokes can be funny, there are some that rely on some of the teenage culture stuff about sex and all that stuff, which over the years I just no longer find funny and never really found the appeal for it. Ted is a fine show overall, definitely had its moments, but it really showed me that I am generally not into Seth MacFarlane stuff now than back when I was younger. But this is still 10 times better than Modern Family Guy. Up next is Sonic Prime Season 3. I spoke highly of this season when it came out, but in retrospect, I do think it is the weakest season of the show. Now there are things I like in this season. The animation is pretty good for what it is, but it is a letdown that there aren't any more places to visit in the show, though it makes sense in the context of the show with there being 5 shards. The first half of Season 3 is really good. Not as good as Season 2, but better than most of Season 1. Already showing us a threat that Nine is and what he can do to not only Sonic, but the Shatterverse. The action is pretty consistent in the show, not the best we've seen, but I enjoyed it. My absolute favorite thing in this season is the relationship between the 3 versions of Amy. They all have some great scenes together and really elevated the experience, even in the second half of the show. What keeps this one down is that the second half of Season 3 is very much the weakest part of the entire show. Now it is not the worst thing in the world that I've seen, but the second half of this season, aside from the final episode, is all just one giant battle scene stretched out into 4 episodes. It really messes with the pacing, it makes it kinda hard to see on watching. I also think that the attempts of a joke in this show is overall not all that good, so that definitely lowers the show for me. Also, the more I think about the ending, the more I don't like it, more so with Nine. He's someone who nearly tried to end a world but gets off scot-free. It feels a bit too nice for me, though this feels like something Sega wanted more than what the team wanted, given how they are pushing for brand consolidation. I still overall like Sonic Prime, but it is the weakest Sonic show out there that I've seen. I do want to make a video on this show as a whole one day, since it's one that fascinates me more than anything. But overall, I had an overall good time with Season 3. Tales of the TMNT Season 1 was a show that came out last year, and it is honestly better than I expected. I think it is no surprise that the highlight of the show is definitely the action scenes, with the standout scene going to the TMNT fighting against Goldfin. Such good choreography and sound design that really sells the impact of the attacks. While I do prefer the animation in the movie, I will say that the animation in the show isn't all that bad with the comic book effect they are going for. I also thought that this show was pretty funny with jokes that got a good laugh out of me. Basically, any scene of the Turtles interacting with April is a good one. While we know what to expect from the TMNT in terms of personality, I do think that the interactions with the other characters was fun. I really like the new interpretations in the show, like Hun and Bishop. Hun is just a really chill person who just wants to protect his chickens, and Bishop had a pretty tragic backstory in this one, and you understand her motives by the end of the first storyline of the show. I will say that the first half of the show involving Bishop and the Mechazoids was the show at its best, since it had constant action and a really compelling cast of side characters and Bishop. The second half of the show, while good, was not as engaging. Probably because Fishfin is a character I didn't really care much about, and the side characters in this half were not really my cup of tea, like the other mutants we got. There were also moments where the show can get kinda gross, so I do not recommend watching the show while eating. Not much to say on this one other than I had a good time with this one, and I would be down for more Tales of the TMNT episodes. Young Sheldon Season 7. Yeah, I binged all of Young Sheldon. It was surprisingly really good. Like, I cared for characters and all that jazz. But let's talk about Season 7. I honestly thought that this season was kind of lacking compared to Seasons 4 through 6. Though that might be because of the reduced episode count that this season has compared to the other seasons of the show. Like, I didn't feel like we got to do much with Missy or Georgie in this season compared to the others. I guess you could make the case for Georgie given that the sequel spinoff is a thing now, but I digress. Some characters feel like as though they got one, but it didn't show up like Connie. It also doesn't help that this show is cursed with having some of the worst mothers I have seen in all of media. I cannot express how much I despise Mary and Audrey. The worst moment of the seasons and the show in general was when they baptized their grandson and granddaughter's child without the consent of Georgie and Mandy. It honestly made me wish that they didn't show up to Mandy and Georgie's wedding at all. But there were still some great things in the show that have stuck with me after all these months. I really like George in this season a lot. He really came into his own, making his own decisions and still being there for his kids. Missy is as fun as ever, came with Connie. Mandy definitely grew on me more with this season, as I mentioned her as one of my favorite characters of the show. I really liked a good chunk of episodes, but I think my favorite part of season 7 is the 2-part finale. I could not have asked for a better finale for those characters, really putting a better emphasis on the drama than the comedy. The final scene of Funeral is my favorite scene in not only season 7, but of the show. Sheldon gives a speech that is well told and heartfelt, but for us to learn that he didn't give it and regrets it, it really humanized Sheldon more than we expected. I also quite like the ending of the final episode with a grown-up Sheldon showing us how he still cares about his family no matter what happened to them, and having more respect for his father. Anyway, this was a great send-off to the show, but it definitely is one of the lesser seasons of the show for me. Don't worry, I will never watch Big Bang Theory. Murder Drones. This independent show has been running for 3 years and ended last year, and I was there from day one. The show in its early run definitely had weak moments in terms of its writing, but it definitely picked up around episode 4 or 5. I quite like the characters in the show. Uzi is someone that speaks to me because she acted like me in middle school, but I like how no matter what happens, she is still the same robot that she is. And it's someone I like, but I think he worked better when he was paired with someone like Uzi or V. She's someone who I didn't care for much in the show, but she definitely got better the longer it went on. The animation in the show is pretty good, and the action scenes are fantastic, really selling the impact of them. Also, I've been listening to the soundtrack of the show, and it is so good. One of the strongest elements of the show is the mystery aspect. The first time watching these episodes, I was intrigued in how much we were going to learn more about the world of the show. The mystery definitely reached its highest point in episodes 5 and 6, where there is so much more to unpack about the show and what is going on. Also, the final episode of the show is just straight up an action anime episode, and it's amazing. Murder Drones isn't one of my all-time favorite things to come out of indie animation, but it is a great example on how much freedom going independent can be, since I really can't imagine a show like this being greenlit in our current climate. Bluey Season 3. I honestly don't know what I can say about this show that hasn't already been said, when almost everyone who watches it has said the same thing. It's a great show, one of the best preschool shows out there, and it will make you cry. I definitely agree with that, with The Sign being one of the best episodes of the show, and definitely one of the most emotional. But I will say that I do wish that The Sign was the last episode of the season instead of just one typical episode of the show, especially considering that Season 3 dealt with a lot more mature things like abandonment issues and infertility, but that's just me. Definitely a great season of the show, a fantastic special at the end, and probably my favorite season. Though I would have to rewatch Season 1 and Season 2 at some point. The last show before we reach the top 5, My Adventures of Superman Season 2. I am not the biggest Superman guy on the planet, but man, this show makes me want to watch more Superman media. The action is really good in the show, and is supported by the amazing animation. I really like the core 3 characters. They are the best. I also really like the side characters in the show. They're just fun characters with their own lives. I especially liked how they did Livewire. Or I like how they did Kara. Now, I may not be a comic guy, but almost all backstories for Kara I've seen is that she came to Earth many years later after Clark. But in this one, she is being manipulated by Brainiac, which made her a very compelling character to watch. I love how she learns the truth, I love her moments with Clark. I will kill for more reactions between her and Jimmy. They are so cute together. Yeah, I am down for this version of Kara. I never seen a depiction of Brainiac before, but I really liked him in this show. He was a threat and has a personal grudge against Superman and Kara. It was really compelling to watch. My favorite part of the show is the relationship between Clark and Lois. I already loved them in Season 1, but Season 2 tests the relationship when they have something to tell the other, and it leads to them arguing. It was this moment in the show where I had to ask, is this one of the best superhero shows I have ever seen? And my question was answered when I got to episode 9, and I fucking cheered for those two. The only real problem I have with My Adventures of Superman is that there is one weak episode in the show, which was episode 3. Not a bad episode of the show, but definitely not the most engaging to watch compared to the rest of the show. But yeah, My Adventures of Superman is amazing, has one of the best superhero couples in all of media. Seriously, I cannot stress how much I love Lois and Clark. Top 5 time, let's do this. My 5th favorite show of 2024 is Dandadan Season 1. I'm gonna be honest, this show wasn't working for me at first. I really enjoyed the first episode episodes of the show. It set the foundation for what to expect with most of the show going forward with how batshit insane it was going to be. But the poem was a little too goofy for those first few episodes for my liking. And also the jokes just weren't landing for me as much as episode 1. After episode 3, however, I really grew to love these characters. Seeing our main duo grow to have feelings for each other and meeting these new characters. Okura and Ayase bounce off of each other really well, and you just want them to get together by the end of each episode. Aira was a character I was not vibing with at first because it led to a love triangle, which is one of, if not my least favorite trope in all of media, but that has dropped after 2 episodes, so it's not as bad as I think it was going to be. Gigi, however, is someone I am not the biggest fan of. He gives me vibes of comic relief in a show that is already pretty silly and out there. The fight choreography is really good, and the concept of the show is very out there. Humans with demon powers fighting demons and aliens is very goofy, but it leads to some of the most visually stunning parts of the show. I can't mention the show without mentioning episode 7, where it flipped the script and got me to really care for the enemy in the show. That episode definitely made me cry. While it did take a while for it to click with me, unlike my other friends who watched the show, I am glad that I watched it at all. I am definitely excited for season 2 when it drops. My 4th favorite show of 2024 is Delicious in Dungeon Season 1. This was the show I watched because one of my friends, the Naxter, told me that one of the composers for the show was done by Yasunori Mitsuda, who, if you don't know, did the music for these little 2 games. You know, you may not have heard them. They're called Chrono Trigger and Xenoblade. So yeah, it didn't take much for me to convince me to watch this show, and I'm glad I did because it has quickly risen to be one of my favorite anime in recent memory. This is one of the funniest anime I have seen so far. Just so many moments in the show that just had me dying. Anything involving Lilos and a monster is just comedy gold. I also like how while it is a comedy show, it also has its moments to slow down and be serious, giving us a perfect blend so we aren't seeing the same thing over and over again per episode. Also, since this show is also about food, it is no lie that the food in the show looks so good and I wish it was real, but that would either be unrealistic or I have to go to a collab cafe in Japan. So yeah, unrealistic. But my favorite thing about this show is that it gave us the best character in all of fiction, Senshi. Now, I like all the characters in the show. They all work well off each other, but Senshi is my favorite character in the show, one of my new favorite characters in any anime. He just has the best chemistry of all the characters, especially between him and Chilchuck. It's perfect. But the second half of season 1 definitely delved more into his character. Also, I think Senshi has some of the greatest expressions in the show. I have a folder of just Senshi photos, and I will never lose those photos in my life. Anyway, yeah, Delicious Dungeon is an amazing show. I cannot stop thinking about it and laughing about it. I hope season 2 is just as amazing as season 1. My 3rd favorite show of 2024 is Arcane Season 2. Now, I don't give a rat's ass about League of Legends, but I gave a shit about the characters in the show. Season 2 is probably my favorite season of Arcane. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I'm gonna stand by it. The pacing was better in this season, with scenes that took their time, whereas season 1's first act left me screwing my seat a bit. Every episode in this season was not boring or left me wanting less of one thing. One of the things I want to focus on in this segment is Jinx. Jinx is my favorite character in the show, next to Caitlyn and Victor. She has a compelling character journey that I think improved season 1 thanks to this season. She is someone who never really had love going to her after Vi yelled at her, so now she is considered a hero amongst the people of Zan. So seeing her get affection is weird, even though she was there mainly for Isha. Also, Jinx and Isha are the best pair in the show. They are so cute together. There's a great video by Cellspecs going further into this, and it was a really good watch. I also really grew to love the characters by this point. Caitlyn and Vi are the best gay couple in all of fiction. Echo and Heimerdinger were surprisingly a fun combo this season, and it definitely had more to do in the story than I thought they would. The animation in the show is phenomenal as always, but one thing I think has improved from season 1 is the soundtrack. So many songs have not left my head after watching the show, like Remember Me, Heimerdinger's song in episode 7, and my favorite song in the show, Ashes and Blood, which plays in my favorite battle scene in the show. What really keeps the show back from reaching the top spot is that I think by Act 3, the show felt rushed. It feels like we should have gotten more from the show, like the alternate timeline Echo and Heimerdinger were in, so we could have explored more of Jinx's mental status after losing Isha. But whatever, I still really like season 2, and it is one of my recent favorite shows in recent memory. That didn't make sense, but I'm gonna stand by that. My second favorite show of 2024 is Smiling Friend Season 2. I was a little worried going into season 2, but nearly after 3 rewatches in 1 month, yes, I am being serious, I can say that season 2 is a banger, definitely my preferred season of the show as a whole, and probably my favorite comedy show of all time. This season felt more extra than the previous season. Season 1 mostly felt more grounded in its concepts like helping a celebrity or random people. While we do get some of that in season 2, there are a lot more insane and interesting concepts we play with in season 2. Helping a video game character get their job back, going to Adobe Flashland, aliens, and just following one man's journey to just grab a box of paper clips that leads him to a fucking Odyssey level journey. And this is definitely a more subjective talking point, but I think that season 2 is just funnier than season 1. There are just some all-time favorite jokes in this one that had me and my friends love and quote all the time, like the Yeti in episode 8 and everything that the landlord says in episode 3. I am being serious when I say this, we need more landlord in season 3. I'd say that the only thing that kept this season from reaching number 1 on my list is that I am not the biggest fan of Brother's Egg. It's a good episode of the show, and I do think the drama regarding these two brothers was really good, but it didn't really hold up all that well in terms of comedy for me compared to other episodes people said were weak, like Mr. President and Charlie, Pim, and Bill versus the aliens. But this is still a banger season of TV, and I highly recommend it for a Alan adventure alone because that episode is peak. Now for my favorite show of 2024, which is Invincible season 2. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it right then and there. I knew that this show was gonna be number 1 on this list, but after watching the entirety of the second season, I am shocked to say that Invincible has become one of my favorite shows ever now. Season 2 of Invincible is not totally different from the first season. It is all blood and violent and stuff, but what separates them is that while season 1 was more focused on the mystery of what happened to the League and slowly figuring out Omni-Man, season 2 delves more into the psychological side of these characters, which is why I overall prefer season 2 over season 1. The first half of season 2 was fantastic because of how it shows us how the world and our characters are feeling without Omni-Man anymore, but I think I prefer the second half of season 2, as it is more about Mark trying his best to not be like Omni-Man, balancing being a superhero in his normal life of college, his family, and girlfriend, which by the way was handled better than in season 1, but that's not really a contest. And it all leads up to the finale of the season, where it shook me to my core, showing us that even for as much Mark wants to not end up like his father, he still has those same emotions of a Viltrumite. This season also got me addicted to 2 other characters, though being Alan and Debbie. Alan was someone we did not see a whole lot of in season 1, I think he showed up like twice that season, but in season 2 we got some more stuff with him, regarding his part of the story and how he's going to play a role in the next season. Also, this is one of the few Seth Rogen roles that I actually quite like, though that's probably because he didn't laugh like he normally does, so that helps a lot. And there is Debbie. I already loved Debbie in season 1, but season 2 went into how she is dealing with the aftermath of Omni-Man, and it is so sad to watch her slowly deteriorate. We also still see her be the Debbie we know in season 1, with her remarks and how she won't take shit from Cecil. I don't want to spoil much, but needless to say, I am excited for season 3 more than ever, and what my friend Alec has told me, I am in for a treat. Please watch Invincible if you haven't. It is one of, if not the best, superhero media of all time. And that is all the TV I saw this year. I don't know if I'll keep with all the shows coming out next year, but I will say that I'll definitely be watching Invincible season 3, The Last of Us season 2, Andor season 2, and I'll definitely be there for The Bear season 4. That is the last end of the year video, so I'll see you all in the next big video for our channel, and as always, have a nice day.